Why did the air inside the helicopter suddenly feel colder? She'd been on dozens of flights like this one, black ops insertions, high-altitude drops, night raids across nameless ridges, but something about tonight felt different. The kind of different you couldn't explain, only feel in your bones. Staff Sergeant Hayes sat near the open side door of the 8,000 feet above the jagged ridges of the Hindu Kush. The night air hissed past her face, cold enough to numb her lips beneath the oxygen mask. Through the green tint of her night vision goggles, the mountains below looked like frozen waves, ancient, immovable, and silent. She checked her rifle, then her harness, then her altimeter. Everything was routine, everything except the silence between her and the other soldiers. Delta Force. They were supposed to be allies, professionals, but they hadn't spoken to her since takeoff, not even small talk, just thin smiles and side glances that didn't reach their eyes. She worked with them before, different men, same arrogance. The Rangers were sharp, disciplined, deadly, but Delta carried themselves like they were gods of war. And tonight Alex could feel it. This wasn't camaraderie, it was containment. 10 minutes to drop zone, the pilot's voice cracked through her headset. Alex nodded more to herself than anyone. She ran a mental checklist: mags loaded, GPS secure, knife in place, backup radio sealed in waterproof casing. She always double-checked everything, because out here everything tried to kill you: the cold, the terrain, and sometimes your own. Across from her sat Master Sergeant Jack Reeves, the team leader. Face, eyes like winter glass, and a smile that never quite made it past his teeth. He'd spent years in covert assignments. Rumor said he'd done things even the Pentagon wouldn't acknowledge. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but heavy with something else. Hayes. She looked up. Sir. Tell me about the terrain again. Her tone stayed even, professional. 3 valleys converge at the target. Heavy cover on the eastern ridge, better for an approach. Village sits low, open sight lines from the north. If's there, he'll have sentries on the cliffs above the river, probably 4, maybe 5. Reeves nodded slowly, studying her in the shifting green glow. You know this region well. 5 deployments will do that. A flicker of something passed over his face. Contempt, maybe. Command thinks highly of you. Alex didn't respond. He wasn't giving a compliment, he was making an observation. And in this business, the difference mattered. His gaze lingered another second before he looked away and gave a signal to his men. A small gesture, subtle, almost invisible. But Alex had spent her life reading the language of violence, tiny movements that preceded terrible things. The cold in her stomach deepened. Sir, she said, her voice steady, something wrong. Reeves leaned in until she could smell the metallic tang of his gear oil and the faint trace of tobacco. You know what your problem is, Hayes? No, sir. You're too good. Her hand drifted an inch closer to her sidearm. I'll take that as a compliment. Not intended as one. For a moment, the only sound was the heavy drone of the rotors above. Reeves exhaled, slow, almost casual. Every warlord in these mountains knows the name Hayes, the female ranger, the ghost who walks their valleys. You shut down trade routes, cost a lot of people a lot of money. She said nothing. Her pulse slowed, not from fear but calculation. 5 men, 1 confined space, no exits but the door. This isn't a mission, is it? She asked quietly. Reeves smiled thinly. No, Sergeant, it's an adjustment. Her throat tightened. An adjustment. He nodded to his men. You know how it is. Equipment malfunctions, harness fails, tragic accident. How much are they paying you? 50 grand each, he said without hesitation, plus future considerations. The moment froze. She saw the glint of his knife before it moved. A blur of steel slashed through her shoulder strap, then another, severing her harness line. Sir. But before the word finished leaving her mouth, 2 pairs of hands grabbed her arms. The helicopter door yawned open beside her. Black sky, endless wind, and 8,000 feet of nothing. Reeves leaned close enough for her to see his eyes behind the goggles. Nothing personal, Hayes. You're just too damn effective at your job. And then they threw her out. The wind tore the scream straight out of her lungs. For 3 seconds there was only chaos, her body tumbling through the night sky, goggles flashing, the mountains below twisting like knives. 4 seconds in, clarity. Training took over. She spread her arms and legs, forcing her body into a stable arch. The spinning slowed, breath steadied, altitude dropping fast, 45 seconds, maybe 50, before impact. She forced her mind to focus. Step 1, orientation. Mountains, river, light reflection, South Fork, the Cornell Valley. She knew it like her own skin. Step 2, location. She tracked toward the glint of silver far below the river. It was narrow but deep, swollen with snowmelt. It would be freezing, but it was better than rock. Step 3, angle. Too steep, and she'd hit the water like a bullet against concrete. Too shallow, and she'd skip across it like a stone and die anyway. 20 seconds. She pressed her rifle tight against her chest, ankles locked, hands at her head, muscles tense but not rigid. Her body became a weapon guided by mathematics and instinct. 10 seconds. She saw individual ripples in the water, rocks beneath the surface, too late to change course. 5. She inhaled once, deeply, deliberately. Impact. The world shattered. Her body slammed into the freezing torrent with the force of a car crash. Pain detonated from her feet up her spine, her bones screaming under the sudden deceleration. The water swallowed her whole, dragging her into darkness. She didn't think, she didn't feel, she moved. Down, then up. Her arms cut through the water, every motion electric with pain. Something in her shoulder tore. A rib snapped. The cold burned like fire under her skin, but survival was the only command her brain accepted. She kicked toward the light above. Her lungs screamed. Her hands broke the surface and she gasped, a sound half scream, half prayer. The current caught her, slamming her into a boulder. White-hot pain flashed through her side, ribs fracturing further. But that same collision pushed her toward the shallows. She clawed for the gravel bank, nails breaking, boots digging into wet stone until finally she was out. For 30 seconds she didn't move. She lay on her back, coughing up water and blood, staring at the stars. Every breath was a war, but she was alive. Alive. Her left arm hung uselessly, shoulder dislocated. Her ribs felt like splintered glass. Right knee screamed with every twitch. And yet her mind was already cataloging damage, prioritizing tasks. Move, shelter, heat. Above there was circling, searching, maybe confirming the kill. Its rotors thudded faintly through the cold air. She crawled toward the tree line, dragging herself inch by inch into the cover of darkness. Her vision blurred, but the mountain instincts carried her. She found a cluster of rocks forming a shallow shelter and collapsed inside. Her fingers shook as she tore open her emergency kit. Waterproof lighter, space blanket, bandages, morphine injector. She hesitated at the morphine. Pain was information. She couldn't afford fog. Instead, she bit down on her rifle sling, grabbed her shoulder and jerked. A sickening pop, a sound that would haunt her dreams. She swallowed the scream. The pain radiated white through her skull, but the joint was back in place. She bound her ribs with the sling, forcing her lungs to work against pressure rather than collapse. The radio was dead, cracked, waterlogged. GPS beacon functional, but useless. If she activated it, the same men who'd thrown her out would come to finish the job. So she stayed still, wrapped in the metallic whisper of the emergency blanket, staring at the faint glimmer of moonlight through the trees. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment. Reeves's words, the knife flash, the betrayal. $50,000. That's what her life had been worth. And yet beneath the shock and pain, a strange calm settled in her chest, because she understood something Reeves never would. He hadn't killed her. He'd just given her a reason to live harder than ever before. Dawn crept slowly across the valley, painting the snowcaps gold. Alex's breath fogged in the cold air as she tested her limbs. Her shoulder screamed. Her ribs burned. Her knee barely bent, but she was upright. She looked down at the distant river glinting in the light, the same one that had almost killed her, and in doing so, saved her life. Above, the faint drone of the returned. She crouched low under the trees, watching. It circled the area where she'd fallen, hovered, then drifted north. She could almost imagine the confusion in Reeves's voice when they didn't find a body. They'd think she was gone. They were wrong. The sun broke fully over the mountains, and for the first time since the fall she allowed herself to feel it, the warmth against her bruised skin. The simple, stubborn miracle of being alive. She tore a strip from her uniform and wrapped it around her hand, covering a bleeding gash. Every motion hurt. Every breath cost her, but she smiled faintly. "Ghosts don't die easy," she whispered. And in that whisper lived a promise. A promise to her grandfather, the man who taught her how to fight, how to survive, how to never let betrayal be the final word. They thought she'd vanished into the dark. But what they'd really done was unleash something far worse. A ranger with nothing left to lose. And everything to prove. Why was the morning so quiet? Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the waiting kind, the kind that presses on your chest like a warning. Alex crouched in the shadows beneath a cluster of pines, the early light painting the valley below in pale gold. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but her mind refused. There was no safety yet, not while they were still up there. Through cracked binoculars, she watched the sweep low over the river. It circled the spot where she'd fallen, its blades chopping the thin mountain air. For a moment, it hovered. Then 5 figures dropped to the ground, dark shapes against the bright gravel. Reeves was among them. Even from a quarter-mile away, she recognized the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, a predator surveying territory he thought he owned. They were searching, but they weren't looking for a survivor. They were looking for confirmation, a body. Alex's lip tightened. She had no illusions. If they found proof she lived, they'd finish what they started. She slid backward into deeper cover, her every motion deliberate. The world had narrowed to survival, breath, heartbeat, movement. Each step hurt, but pain was a metric she could work with, information she could manage. She needed distance and a plan. The Coronal Valley stretched below her like a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Somewhere out there, about 10 miles west, was an old ranger cache stocked months ago during a recon mission. Food, ammo, med supplies, maybe even a working radio. It was her only shot. But first, she had to make sure Reeves didn't follow. She crawled through the undergrowth, moving uphill to gain a vantage point over the riverbank. The Delta team spread out, moving with textbook precision, fields of fire, overlapping arcs, no wasted motion, professional killers, and yet careless. Because they thought she was dead. One of them, if memory served, paused to drink from his canteen. A small moment of humanity, comfort, complacency, the kind of mistake that got men killed out here. Alex studied the scene through her scope. The helicopter sat idling on the rocks, tail rotor shimmering in the heat haze. The comms array, a tall antenna, was mounted on the top. A message formed in her mind, simple, wordless, perfect. She adjusted the scope, compensating for wind drift. Her injured shoulder protested, but she ignored it. The distance, 800 meters, was long even on a good day. Today it felt impossible, but impossible was just another word for required. She steadied her breath, counting the beats between heart pulses. In, out, stillness. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the valley, rolling off the cliffs like thunder. The antenna shattered in a burst of sparks. Plastic and metal rained across the gravel. 5 men hit the ground instantly, instinct overriding thought. Reeves spun toward the source, scanning the. Alex's lips curved slightly. She didn't aim at them. That would have been predictable. She aimed at their connection to the world. Message delivered. For 10 seconds, the only sound was the echo of the shot fading into the mountains. Then, Reeves's voice carried faintly through the cold morning air. "Hayes, I know that's you." She said nothing. "Be smart about this, it's just business." Still nothing. From her perch she watched them scatter, forming a perimeter. They were professionals, but shaken. The hunter had become the hunted, and psychologically that shift was lethal. She moved immediately. Rule 1, never fire twice from the same place. Her knee nearly gave out on the descent, but she gritted her teeth and pushed on, sliding down a rocky slope toward the tree line. The pain was like fire eating through her leg, but the alternative was worse. They'd start triangulating her shot. She needed to vanish before they did. By the time Reeves's team reached her previous position, she was already half a mile away, working her way deeper into the forest. Each breath burned. Her ribs felt like glass shards grinding with every step. Her vision blurred at the edges from exhaustion and blood loss. But her mind was clear, razor sharp, locked on survival. She moved through the trees like smoke, using every trick the mountains had taught her. Step where the ground is soft, pause before breaking branches, let the wind carry your scent away. By midday she'd made 4 miles, halfway. She collapsed beside a narrow stream, filling her canteen and letting the icy water burn down her throat. The reflection staring back at her from the surface barely looked human. Mud, blood, and exhaustion painted across a face that had aged years in a single night. And yet her eyes were alive, focused, defiant. She studied the distant peaks, remembering her grandfather's voice. "You don't survive because you're lucky, Alex. You survive because you prepare for when luck runs out." He was right, he always had been. Her next step was clear. Reach the cache, get supplies, call for help if help still existed. Because Reeves wasn't just a trader. He was part of something bigger, something older. She didn't have proof yet, but the way he'd said her grandfather's name before throwing her out, it wasn't random. It was personal. The mountains whispered around her as wind sifted through pine needles. Somewhere far off, she heard faint rotor noise. Not one helicopter this time, too. They were sweeping wider, expanding the grid. She slid under a tangle of roots and went still. Mud pressed cold against her cheek as the sound passed overhead. Minutes stretched into hours before silence returned. When it did, she moved again, slower now, pain grinding through her joints with every motion. By dusk, she'd reached a high ridge overlooking the next valley. Her map, a waterproof scrap salvaged from her pocket, showed the cache 2 miles further northwest, hidden behind a waterfall cave. She could make it by morning if she kept moving. But first she needed rest. She found a shallow hollow beneath an overhanging boulder and crawled inside. The air was sharp and thin. Her body trembled uncontrollably, the early stages of hypothermia setting in again. She tore open a chemical heat pack and pressed it against her chest under the emergency blanket. For the first time since the fall, she allowed herself to close her eyes. The darkness that came wasn't restful, it was filled with memories. Her friend Mike in the armory back at the base, his voice low. "Something stinks about this mission, Alex." She remembered laughing it off, calling it paranoia. Now his words echoed like prophecy. "Orders are orders," she'd said back then. God, she hated that line now. The image of Reeves's face loomed again in her mind, the calm certainty of a man doing what he believed was necessary. Not for money, not just for greed. There'd been conviction in his tone, belief. This wasn't about betrayal, It was about something larger. Her dreams broke apart into fragments of memory. The armory, the rushed briefing, her grandfather's name whispered in the dark. When she woke, the stars were already high. Cold seeped back into her bones. Her hands shook as she forced herself upright, wincing as her knee locked into place. Time to move. The forest stretched silent before her, silvered in moonlight. She moved like a ghost, guided by instinct and pain and sheer will. An hour later, as she crested the final ridge, a faint sound stopped her. A metallic click, the unmistakable sound of a rifle bolt sliding home. Her body froze. "I would not do that, American," a voice said behind her. Male, calm, slight accent. Her hand hovered near her pistol. "You planning to shoot me?" "If I wanted you dead," the voice replied, "you would already be." Slowly she turned. The man standing 10 feet away looked like he belonged to the mountains themselves. Weathered skin, graying beard, worn clothes, and eyes that had seen too many wars. An old Kalashnikov rested in his hands, pointed just low enough to show restraint. "I am Faird," he said. "You are the one they call Ghost." Alex studied him in silence. "Colonel Hayes said you might come this way," Faird continued, "if there was trouble." Her heart kicked once hard. "You knew my grandfather?" Faird nodded. "He came here 3 months ago, said Russian wolves were returning to these mountains, told me to watch the caches." The mention of Russia snapped everything into sharper focus. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Faird reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a coin. A dull, scratched challenge coin with the insignia of the old Gulf War unit her grandfather had commanded. "He said to give you this, said it would remind you of Montana, winter, the day he taught you to shoot his pistol in the snow." The breath caught in her throat. That memory wasn't written anywhere. It wasn't in any record. It belonged to her and her grandfather alone. She lowered her weapon slightly. "All right," she said, "talk." Faird's expression softened. "Not here, too exposed. Come, I have a place." They moved in silence through narrow switchbacks until the valley opened into a small hollow. A shepherd's hut sat against the rocks, smoke curling faintly from a chimney. Inside, it was spare but warm: cots, old maps, a small wood stove. Alex collapsed on a stool, exhaustion washing over her. Faird handed her a tin cup of strong tea. "Your grandfather said this would happen, that his enemies were waking again." She met his eyes. Enemies. From long ago, Russians, Operation Snowstorm. The name chilled her. She'd heard it once before, a classified Cold War counterintelligence project, something her grandfather had worked on before she was born. "What did he say exactly?" she asked. "That if you came alone, it meant the wolves had returned, and you would need help." He reached under a floorboard and lifted a small metal case. "He left this for you." Inside were 3 things: a satellite phone, a small data drive, and a folded note written in her grandfather's hand. "Alex, if you're reading this, they've made their move. Trust no one in your chain of command. Wilson is compromised. Use secure protocol. The Cold War never ended, it only went underground. Stay alive. RH." She read the message twice. Wilson, the same Major Wilson who'd briefed the mission. Her pulse quickened. The puzzle pieces she'd ignored before, the odd timing, the forced attachment to Delta, the way Reeves had known about her grandfather, it all fit now. This wasn't about. This was about something buried decades ago, waking up again. Faird spoke softly. "2 nights ago, I saw men at an old Soviet bunker 20 kilometers north. One wore Delta uniform. They carried heavy crates, Russian markings." Alex's gaze hardened. "Reeves." She snapped the satellite phone open. The screen flickered to life, but instead of a connection, red text blinked. "Network COMPROMICD. Data PROTOCOLS only." They were listening everywhere. She stared into the dim firelight. her mind already forming the next step. "I need to reach that bunker," she said. Faird hesitated. "You can barely walk." "I'll crawl if I have to." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Then I will go with you." Outside, the night pressed close, heavy with wind and silence. Alex stood at the threshold, staring toward the dark ridges beyond. Somewhere out there, the men who'd betrayed her were setting up something far bigger than she'd imagined. And somewhere, her grandfather was watching the same storm begin to form. The Cold War was waking up again. And Hayes, broken, hunted, bleeding, was already walking straight into it. Why did the wind sound like whispers? It moved through the narrow mountain pass like breath through a dying man's lungs, dragging the night with it. Each gust carried flecks of snow, and the echo of memories Alex had been trying to bury. She trudged behind Faird, her boots crunching softly against frozen gravel. Her body screamed for rest, but the weight of her grandfather's message drove her forward. The Cold War never ended, it only went underground. That line wouldn't leave her head. The narrow beam of her cut through the fog, revealing the trail snaking along the ridge. The world below was darkness, 1,000 feet of nothing but air and ghosts. Faird walked steadily ahead, his breath visible in the cold. The man was older than he looked, but his stride never faltered. "We must move before dawn," he said quietly. "Once light hits the valley, their drones will see us." Alex nodded. Her shoulder throbbed under the sling and her ribs burned with every step, but her voice was steady. "How far to the bunker?" 6 kilometers, hidden in the rock, built by Soviets during the Old War. Your grandfather helped seal it after the fall. She frowned. He was Army intelligence back then. Why would he seal a Soviet base? Faird glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. Because it was not only Soviet. The words cut through the cold like a blade. She wanted to ask what he meant, but his silence afterward was final. He was saving it for later, if there was a later. They reached a small plateau before dawn. The horizon was bleeding pale blue. Faird motioned her into cover beneath a shelf of rock. He crouched beside her, pulling a thermal blanket from his pack. "We rest here, eat little, no fire." Alex nodded. Her stomach was a hollow drum. She chewed half a protein bar, forcing it down. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind that came from two people who understood what words couldn't fix. Her eyes drifted toward the valley below, the same river she'd fallen into days ago, now a silver scar cutting through the land. She remembered Reeves's voice, "Nothing personal, Hayes." She wondered if that's what he told himself now, while sleeping comfortably in a stolen bunker full of secrets. Her mind drifted to her grandfather, Richard Hayes, retired colonel, decorated veteran, one of the few people she trusted without hesitation. He'd always told her that betrayal didn't break a soldier, it revealed them. She just never thought she'd be the one being revealed. Langley, Virginia. The morning light filtered through thin blinds into a small, quiet office filled with dust and ghosts. Colonel Richard Hayes, Ret. 74, stared at a satellite feed frozen on his monitor. It showed a blurred heat signature in the Hindu Kush region, one faint, fatting dot. The dot that was supposed to be his granddaughter. He leaned back slowly, the leather chair creaking beneath his weight. His reflection in the screen looked tired. The war had never left him, it just changed its flag. He picked up the phone. "Wilson, it's Hayes." There was a pause, then a voice, calm, professional, too smooth. "Colonel, I was just going to call you." "Don't insult me, Major. Where?" "She's presumed KIA. Mission went bad, helicopter incident." Hayes's jaw tightened. "I read your report, it's garbage. There's no wreckage, no flight anomaly, no comms trace. You're lying." Silence, then, "Colonel, with respect, you're retired. Classified operations are outside your clearance." Hayes laughed bitterly. I built half the clearance system you're hiding behind, son. Now tell me, who signed the insertion orders for Operation Carver? You're overstepping. I'm asking you for the truth. Wilson's voice hardened. Truth is she's dead, I'm sorry. The line clicked dead. Hayes sat there for a long time, staring at the dial tone. His hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from rage barely contained. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out an old folder, yellowed with time. On the cover, Operation Snowstorm. Inside were pages stamped top secret, bearing his own signature from 1989. He hadn't looked at them in 30 years, not since Moscow fell. But now he understood why they'd come for her. The project had been buried for a reason, not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Back in the mountains, the sun was rising, painting the peaks in violent orange. Faird and Alex moved in silence through the last stretch of forest. The wind had died. Even the birds seemed to sense what waited ahead. When the bunker appeared, it was almost invisible, an iron door half buried in the cliff face, rusted, chained, forgotten by time. But not by men. Fresh boot prints littered the snow, tire marks from a small vehicle. Faird's hand moved to his rifle. They are here. Alex crouched, scanning the area through her scope. 2 guards at the entrance. 1 smoker, 1 lazy. That's our window. You are hurt. I've been worse. She studied their movement patterns, 30-second patrol arcs, short visual gaps, same rhythm every time. Predictable. Reeves had trained his men too well, and that was his weakness. Give me the left flank, she whispered. When I fire, move fast. Faird nodded once, understood. Alex drew in a slow breath. The sniper rifle felt heavier than usual. Her shoulder screamed against the pressure, but she steadied it. Inhale, hold. 2 beats of her heart. Exhale. The shot cracked. The smoker dropped before the cigarette hit the ground. The second turned, reaching for his radio too slow. Faird's burst took him clean. They moved instantly, sprinting through the thin smoke of gunpowder and fear. Alex grabbed the key ring from the dead guard's belt, slamming it into the lock. It resisted, then gave way with a screech that echoed into the mountain. Inside, the air smelled of dust, oil, and something else, old secrets. A corridor stretched into darkness, lined with steel doors. Dim emergency lights flickered weakly along the ceiling, a heartbeat of red. Alex switched to her sidearm and moved forward, each step measured, careful. Her instincts screamed that something was off. At the far end of the hall, a control room glowed faintly blue. Computer monitors hummed, data streaming across them in Cyrillic and English. Faird's whisper broke the silence. This place is alive. She approached one of the screens, reading the code strings. Most were gibberish, encrypted signals, but one line caught her attention. Project Reclamation Access, Wilsonar Active Protocol. Wilson. Her blood went cold. She scrolled further, and there it was, Target, HAYESA. Sorry. Faird stepped closer. They knew you would come. Yeah, she said softly. They wanted me to. The realization hit like ice water. The entire mission, the Delta team, Reeves, the fall, it wasn't to eliminate her. It was to flush her out. Faird, she said, voice low, we need to leave now. But before he could respond, the sound hit them, boots, echoing down the corridor. Not many, 2, maybe 3, but too close. Alex killed the lights. The darkness swallowed them whole. They pressed against the wall as the door opened. Flashlights cut through the gloom, beams sweeping the room. Voices, American, familiar. Reeves. I told you she'd come here, he said quietly. She's predictable. Her bloodline always was. Alex's heart stopped. Her bloodline. He wasn't just talking about her training. He knew. Reeves's light swept over the monitors. Grab the drive, we're done here. Alex moved like a shadow, closing the distance inch by inch. She could smell the gun oil on his rifle, the faint musk of sweat and dust. Her hand tightened around the knife at her hip. Then, a noise from behind. Faird's boot scraped stone. The beam of light swung toward him. Contact. Chaos exploded. Muzzle flashes tore through the dark. Alex dropped low, rolling behind a console as sparks lit the room. She fired twice, one shot, two. A man fell. Another shouted. Then silence. Her chest heaved. The smell of cordite filled the air. Fared. He grunted, leaning against the wall, blood running down his arm. I am fine, just grazed. She didn't believe him, but there was no time. Reeves was gone. His trail led back toward the tunnel, heavy boot prints, and a single line of blood where he dragged something, someone maybe. She followed fast, adrenaline numbing her pain. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, lit by a single flickering bulb. And there he was, Reeves, standing before a metal vault door, holding the stolen data drive. Stop, she shouted. He turned calm, almost relaxed. Alex. Drop it. He looked at her, and for a moment there was something almost sorrowful in his eyes. You really think this is about you? You threw me out of a helicopter. Because I had to. Because if you'd stayed on that bird, you'd have been killed for real. Her grip faltered. What are you talking about? You don't know the half of it. Then tell me. Reeves sighed, shaking his head. Your grandfather started this war, Hayes, and now it's come home. Before she could respond, the vault door opened, and a blinding white light flooded the chamber. Figures stepped out, not military, not Russian, something else. And among them, one face she never thought she'd see again. The shock froze her where she stood. Because standing in the light was Major Wilson. Alive, calm, smiling. Welcome home, Sergeant Hayes, he said softly. We've been waiting. Why did Wilson look like a man welcoming a friend, instead of facing a soldier pointing a gun at him? The white light from the vault washed over his face, soft and steady, almost wholly in contrast to the ruin around them. Behind him, the bunker's inner chamber glowed faintly blue, full of humming consoles, radiation warning signs, and cables that looked older than the Cold War itself. Alex's finger tightened on the trigger. Step away from him, Wilson. He didn't move, didn't even flinch. You really don't understand, do you? Understand what? You threw me into a kill box. You sent Reeves to murder me. I sent Reeves to protect you, Wilson said, but he didn't believe me when I told him you were one of us. Her voice cracked. One of what? Wilson smiled faintly. Your grandfather never told you, did he? She steadied her aim. You have 10 seconds before I put a hole through that smirk. He chuckled quietly, lowering his weapon. You've got his eyes, you know that. Same frost. Same refusal to see the larger picture until it's too late. Don't. He stepped closer, unarmed. Alex, this bunker isn't Russian. Not anymore. It's American, built on Soviet bones. Your grandfather's signature is on the original transfer papers. Operation Snowstorm wasn't about intelligence. It was about inheritance. Her breath hitched. Inheritance. Technology, Sergeant, power. A machine that can rewrite entire defense networks. Something your grandfather helped bury when the Cold War ended. She shook her head. You're lying. Wilson gestured to the vault behind him. See for yourself. She hesitated, rifle steady. Then she glanced toward Faird, who stood pale and silent by the doorway, his arm clutched against his wound. He gave a slight nod. Alex stepped closer. The light from inside bled over her boots, revealing metal structures, racks of servers glowing behind dust and frost. In the center stood a cylinder the size of a man, filled with pale blue fluid, cables snaking from it into the walls. What the hell is that? Wilson's voice lowered. The core of Snowstorm, quantum command architecture. It could break encryption, shut down satellites, rewrite entire databases in minutes. The Soviets built it to control the next war before it began. Your grandfather helped us take it. And then he disappeared. She turned to him sharply. You're saying he knew this existed? Wilson nodded. He helped hide it. He also made sure it couldn't be reactivated without one of his own. Her blood ran cold. One of his own. You. The silence between them thickened, pressing against her ribs harder than the pain. Wilson took a step closer, his voice almost gentle now. Your genetic code, Sergeant. Your DNA is you're the key. She wanted to laugh, to call it absurd, but deep inside something twisted because it felt true. The way her grandfather had always been cautious, secretive. The way he'd made her memorize numbers as a child, claiming they were math drills. She whispered, almost to herself, that's why you sent me here. To activate it, Wilson said simply, to finish what he started. Her rifle wavered. You're insane. Am I? He gestured around the room. The world's breaking apart again, Alex. Cyberwar, AI escalation, autonomous weapons, all chaos. Snowstorm can bring order, balance. You can bring it online. You're the only one who can. She stared at him, breath shaking. You murdered my team for this. Collateral damage. Her voice cracked into a whisper. They trusted you. Wilson's expression didn't change. Trust is a currency, Sergeant. You spend it to build something that lasts. History doesn't remember loyalty, it remembers results. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. You sound just like them, the people we fight. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's because we are them now. That broke something inside her. She fired. The shot missed by inches, hitting the steel near his head and showering sparks across the room. Wilson didn't even blink. Reeves moved then, fast. He stepped from the shadows behind her, arm locking around her throat before she could pivot. Her rifle clattered to the floor. Easy, Reeves muttered. No one needs to die here. Get off me. He tightened the hold just enough to stop her struggle without crushing her windpipe. You don't get it, Hayes. We're not the bad guys. Funny, she rasped. You throw someone out of a helicopter, that usually sends the opposite message. Reeves's voice softened, almost regretful. If I hadn't, they'd have killed you. Wilson wanted you alive, the others didn't. Why? Because they knew what you were worth. Wilson stepped closer, watching them like a surgeon observing his patient. Bring her in. She'll understand soon enough. But Reeves hesitated. For a fraction of a second, his grip loosened, just enough. Alex twisted, driving her elbow backward into his ribs. Pain flared through her shoulder, but adrenaline drowned it out. She grabbed his knife from his vest, spun, and drove the hilt into his jaw. He stumbled, cursing. Alex dove for her sidearm, firing once at the overhead light. The room plunged into darkness. Kill the power, Wilson shouted. Lock the chamber. But by then she was already gone, slipping through the smoke, half blind but moving by memory. Faird's voice echoed faintly from the tunnel. Alex. She found him by instinct, dragging him toward the exit. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets sparking off the walls. The bunker groaned as metal doors sealed one by one, trapping sound and light inside. They burst through the final hatch and into the blinding snow outside. The cold hit like a slap, burning her lungs. She ran until her legs gave out, then crawled, dragging Faird with her until the bunker was nothing but a black scar in the white wilderness. Only then did they stop. Faird collapsed beside her, gasping, You should have left me. She shook her head, Not happening. He smiled weakly. Then you are your grandfather's blood. She looked back toward the hidden valley. The bunker entrance was gone now, swallowed by rock and snow. Somewhere inside, Wilson had what he wanted, and he wouldn't stop there. Her voice was hoarse. He said, I'm the key. Then we must find the lock first, Faird said, before he turns it. Langley, 4 hours later. Colonel Hayes closed the old snowstorm file with shaking hands. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but his mind raced faster than ever. He knew what Wilson was doing. He'd seen the first iteration of the program decades ago, a system built to override military infrastructure in case of nuclear escalation. It wasn't just code, it was sentience. He had buried it, sworn it would never be touched again. And now his granddaughter was trapped in its shadow. The phone on his desk buzzed. He picked it up. "Sir, this is Langley Ops. We're picking up unauthorized satellite pings over northern Afghanistan. Military-grade old encryption." "Patch it through," Hayes ordered. Static filled the line, then a broken female voice came through. "Grandpa, it's Alex." He froze. "Alex, Jesus Christ, you're alive." "They have Snowstorm. Wilson's running it." "Are you safe?" "No time. They want me to activate it. They think I'm the key." The signal cut. Hayes slammed the phone down and stood, heart pounding. He grabbed his coat and sidearm, ignoring the age in his bones. The years fell away in seconds, replaced by muscle memory and rage. He strode down the hall to the restricted wing, his cane echoing like gunfire on tile. Guards moved to stop him, but one look at his face made them step aside. He found Director in her glass-walled office, surrounded by screens and silence. "I told you to keep her out of this," Hayes growled. "Didn't look surprised. You knew this day would come." "I buried Snowstorm so it never would." "The world's changed, Richard. AI weapons, quantum interference. Wilson isn't wrong. We need control." "Control?" He slammed his hand on her desk. "That program nearly destroyed half the global defense net in '89. You unleash it now, you'll start a war no one can stop." She met his gaze, cold, unflinching. "Your granddaughter's involvement was unavoidable. Her genetic signature is hard-coded into the system. She's the only access point left." Hayes's voice broke into a whisper. "You used her." His tone softened slightly. "We protected her until she got too close." "Too close to what?" "The truth." Hayes turned to leave. "I'm going to find her." "Richard," she called after him, "if you go rogue, I can't protect you." He paused at the door. "You never could." Back in the mountains. Night fell heavy and silent. Alex built a small fire inside a cave, hidden by rocks and branches. Faird lay beside it, pale but conscious, his wound wrapped tight. She stared into the flames, her face drawn, haunted. "He said my DNA activates that machine," she murmured. "He said my grandfather helped build it." Faird nodded weakly. "Then your grandfather holds the other key." She looked up, realization dawning. "That's why Wilson left me alive. He knows he can't access it without him." The fire popped softly, the only sound between them. Faird's voice was barely audible. "If you go after him, they will kill you both." Alex's eyes hardened. "They've already tried." She took a deep breath, staring into the flame until it blurred into gold and memory. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Dignity isn't loud, Alex. It's the quiet refusal to quit." She stood slowly, adjusting her rifle strap. The night outside was freezing, endless, but it didn't matter. "Where are you going?" Faird asked. She looked back, eyes burning with resolve. "To end a war my family started." Outside, the wind picked up again, cold, whispering, alive. And in its sound was a promise. The mountain wasn't done testing her. Neither was the world. Why did she feel colder inside than the mountain air around her? The snow was falling again, slow, soundless, endless. The kind of snow that erased footprints and sins alike. Alex trudged through it, each step sinking to her knees, her breath fogging in the dark. Her ribs ached. Her shoulder burned. The pain wasn't her enemy anymore. It was her metronome, one heartbeat, one step, 1 second closer to home. But home wasn't safety anymore. Home was a battlefield waiting to wake up. Behind her, the cave faded into shadow. Faird was still there, barely conscious but stable. She left him with supplies and a rifle, promising she'd return. Promises were dangerous things in war, but she made it anyway. The world was silent except for her boots crunching in the snow. Then, faintly, a sound, the distant chop of rotor blades. She froze. Her heart kicked once hard. That rhythm, steady, military, too controlled for a civilian craft. She pressed herself against a boulder, breath sharp in her throat, eyes scanning the sky. A shape moved through the clouds, a lights dimmed, sweeping low. Reeves it had to be. He was hunting again. She slid down into a ravine, crawling under the shelter of broken rock as the helicopter passed overhead. The snow swirled around her, disguising heat, muffling sound. For 5 long minutes she didn't move, didn't breathe. When it was gone, she pushed herself upright, shaking, furious. "How many times," she whispered, "do they think I'm going to die for them?" Her voice vanished into the wind, but deep inside something stronger replaced the fear, resolve. If Wilson wanted the key, she'd destroy the lock. Langley, Virginia. Colonel Richard Hayes stared out the small window of his old government-issued SUV as the highway blurred past. His driver, ex-CIA Fieldman Stanner, now 40, half gray, half legend, kept one hand on the wheel, the other on a thermos of black coffee. "You sure about this, Colonel?" Stanner asked. "We cross this line, there's no coming back." "I crossed it the day they threw her out of that bird," Hayes said quietly. Stanner glanced at him. "You think she's still alive?" Hayes's gaze hardened. "She's my blood, she doesn't die easy." They drove in silence for a while, headlights slicing through the dawn fog. The back seat was loaded with gear, encrypted radios, field packs, a briefcase marked DECON-07. Hayes had spent all night gathering what little he still controlled inside the labyrinth of Langley: loyalists, old ghosts who owed him favors, and access codes buried deep enough no one dared delete them. Stanner sipped his coffee. "You still haven't told me what we're walking into." Hayes looked out the window, his reflection faint in the glass. "Back in '89, I ran a joint op in Eastern Europe. We were told to intercept Soviet AI research, systems meant to override human command under nuclear stress. They called it Project Snowstorm. We stole it, buried it, thought we ended it." And Wilson. He was a kid then, analyst, obsessed with control. He believed Snowstorm could prevent wars if we just had the will to use it. "Guess he finally found his moment." Hayes nodded. "And my granddaughter's the key he needs to open it." Stanner exhaled slowly. "So what's the play?" "We get to her before they do. Then we end this permanently." Hindu Kush the following night. Alex reached the edge of the plateau overlooking the frozen valley. Below, faint lights glimmered like dying stars, a makeshift outpost, temporary military. She dropped to her stomach, crawling forward through the snow, rifle ready. 2 men patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung lazily. Their uniforms bore no insignia, no nation. Mercenaries. Wilson's reach was global now. Through her scope, she studied their gear, top-tier, American-made. A chill unrelated to the cold slid down her spine. Wilson wasn't hiding from the system. He was the system. She had one advantage: knowledge. The terrain was her ally, and pain was her armor. She waited until one of the guards turned, the other lighting a cigarette. The sound of a lighter flaring. That was the opening. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped silently into the snow. Alex moved before the echoes faded. Quick, precise, quiet. Inside the camp, a small tent glowed faintly with light. She slipped through the flap, weapon raised, only to freeze. On the table lay a photo, her. Younger, in uniform, taken years ago. Beside it, a dossier stamp with a red sigil she didn't recognize. And above it, a satellite image of Langley. Her breath hitched. Wilson wasn't just after her. He was going after her grandfather. She grabbed the files, scanning quickly. One line of text jumped out like a wound. Phase II, contact HAYESR, initiate familial protocol. Jesus, she whispered. Behind her, a voice spoke quietly. I told you you'd come here. Reeves. She turned slowly, pistol raised. He stood at the tent's entrance, rifle slung but eyes locked on hers. You're getting good at finding me, she said. He gave a weary smile. You make it easy. You're the only one left moving against the wind. Funny, she said. I thought you were too. Reeves exhaled. You don't get it, Hayes. Wilson's not just running an op. He's rewriting the rules. The man's got clearance from levels you and I don't even know exist. If he pulls this off, Snowstorm won't just protect the U.S., it'll own it. And you're still helping him. I'm trying to keep people alive. She took a step closer. You threw me out of a helicopter. And saved your life. By breaking it first. Reeves's eyes flickered. You think I wanted to? You were supposed to be extracted. Wilson changed the plan mid-flight, said you were compromised. I didn't know what to believe. Now you do. He nodded slowly. Now I do. The silence between them was razor-thin, trembling with decades of war and guilt. Where Wilson now? She asked. Heading west. Satellite uplink facility. If he activates Snowstorm from there, it's over. Every defense grid, every satellite feed, they'll all bend to his command. She holstered her weapon. Then we stop him. Reeves frowned. You and me against that. She met his eyes. You owe me a fall. For the first time in days, a faint smile crossed his face. Fair enough. Langley. The command center was chaos. Alarms flashing, analysts shouting, data streaming across monitors. Director stood at the center, calm amid the storm. Where the colonel? She demanded. An analyst stammered. He's gone, ma'am. Took a convoy east. No clearance trail. His eyes narrowed. Activate shadow protocol. Bring him back before he burns this entire agency to the ground. But even as she said it, she knew she was already too late. Because on a private encrypted line buried deep in the network, a single message pinged through. From Arhays. To unknown. Text Alex, stay alive, I'm coming. Hindu Kush pre-dawn. Alex and Reeves moved through the snow like ghosts. The air was thin, cold enough to numb thought. Reeves carried the heavier load. Alex guided, her instincts tuned to every sound. The uplink facility sat carved into the side of the western ridge. Old NATO structure, long abandoned, now reactivated under Wilson's command. 2 sentries east approach, Reeves murmured. Thermal shows 4 more inside. Quiet entry. He nodded, quiet as we can. They crept closer. The sentries were lazy, chatting in broken English about home, paychecks, the kind of small-talk soldiers used to pretend they weren't disposable. Alex's pity was brief. 2 muffled shots ended it. Inside, the corridors were dark and stale. Machines hummed low and alive. The deeper they went, the louder the hum grew. Then faint voices, command tones calm, precise. Wilson. They stopped outside a steel door slightly ajar. Through it, light spilled onto the floor. Alex peered inside. Wilson stood before a bank of monitors, data cascading across them, launch grids, satellite feeds, encryption maps. On one screen was an image of Colonel Hayes, marked target, priority. Her throat closed. Reeves whispered, if we shoot him now. She shook her head. No, he's expecting that. Wilson's voice filled the room. Do you think I can't hear you out there, Sergeant? They froze. He turned slowly, smiling. Come in, let's stop pretending. They entered, weapons ready. Wilson raised his hand slightly, not in surrender but in control. Put those down. You're not here to kill me. You're here to understand. Last time someone said that, I jumped out of a helicopter, Alex said flatly. He ignored the jab. Snowstorm is awake, Alex, but it needs both keys, you and your grandfather. He's on his way here right now. Her pulse raced. You're lying. Am I? He stepped aside, revealing a live satellite feed on the screen. A convoy cutting through the mountains, headlights faint but unmistakable. At the center, a military SUV. Your grandfather wants to save you, Wilson said, and by doing so, he'll deliver the final piece. Reeves muttered, you planned this from the start. Wilson smiled faintly. Of course, everything must balance, Sergeant. For order to exist, chaos must first be understood. Alex's hands shook, not from fear but fury. You don't believe in order, you believe in control. Wilson's eyes softened. Same thing. He turned to the console, typing rapidly. On one monitor, the snowstorm system came to life, lines of code cascading like digital rain, the hum turning into a low, pulsing rhythm. Alex aimed her rifle. Step away. Wilson looked at her almost sadly. You can't stop it. You were born to complete it. Then the screens flared white. A tone echoed through the chamber, deep, mechanical, almost human. Voice pattern DETCTD. DNA protocol recognized. Alex froze. What did you do? Wilson smiled. I didn't do anything, you did. The system pulsed again. Primary key accepted, secondary signal inbound. Her heart stopped. Your grandfather, Wilson said softly. He's the second key. Outside, in the endless white of dawn, Colonel Hayes's convoy snaked through the pass. He looked up at the peaks in the distance, unaware that the mountains themselves were watching. He whispered to the wind, hold on, Alex. And somewhere deep inside the bunker, a machine older than peace whispered back. Connection established. Why did the machine sound like it was breathing? Alex stood frozen as the bunker pulsed with pale blue light, the hum of snowstorm deepening into something that didn't sound mechanical anymore. It felt alive, like a heartbeat echoing through the steel. Her pulse matched it without her consent. Wilson, she whispered, shut it down. He didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the glowing console, the data cascading faster now. Lines of code flickered past too quickly for the eye to follow, alternating between English, Russian, and something older, something encrypted even the machine had to translate. Reeves stood beside her, rifle ready but useless in the face of something they couldn't shoot. Tell me that sound isn't what I think it is. It's connecting, Wilson said quietly. It's finding the signal. What signal? He looked at Alex. You. The words sank like ice. She took a step back. You're out of your mind. Am I? He gestured toward the central monitor. You're synced. Your DNA sequence just authenticated Snowstorm's first phase. The second key is on approach. Reeves swore under his breath. Hayes, he's talking about your grandfather. Wilson's tone softened, almost reverent. He was the architect. You are the conduit. Together, you'll make history. Alex shook her head. No, we'll make a graveyard. Wilson's eyes flicked up, cold and certain. The world's already a graveyard, Sergeant. I'm just choosing who gets to walk through it alive. Outside Colonel Hayes's convoy. Snow whipped against the windshield, the storm rising faster than forecast. Hayes gripped the armrest, staring at the faint blue glow flickering across the distant ridges. Tell me that's not what I think it is, Stanner muttered, voice tense. Hayes didn't answer. The air inside the SUV vibrated, faintly at first, then stronger. The static on the radio turned rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then a voice cut through it. Soft female, familiar. Grandpa. Hayes froze. Alex. Her voice came again, faint, broken by static. I can hear you. He looked down at the radio. It wasn't transmitting. It was receiving. Jesus Christ, Stanner said. She's not on comms. That's not radio, sir. That's direct. Neural, Hayes whispered. The quantum uplink. Snowstorm's awake. Inside the bunker, Alex's knees nearly gave out. The voice in her ear wasn't from any speaker, it was inside her head. "Grandpa, can you hear me?" Her breath hitched. "Oh my God." Reeves turned, eyes wide. "What the hell is happening?" Wilson's voice was calm, almost reverent. "The link has begun. She's connected to him through the system's quantum matrix. Distance doesn't matter, neither does hardware. They're synced through blood." Alex gritted her teeth. "You're using us as what power sources?" "As bridges," Wilson said softly. "Human input stabilizes the code. The system doesn't obey commands, it interprets will. You're the translators." Reeves stepped forward, fury boiling through the fear. "You're playing God." Wilson smiled faintly. "Someone has to." He turned back to the console, fingers dancing across the keyboard. On the screens, images began to appear: cities, satellites, missile grids, all flashing between online and override. Alex clutched her head. "Stop it." But the images weren't just on the monitors anymore. They were inside her mind. For a split second she saw everything, hundreds of data points blooming like constellations across the globe, power grids flickering, drones taking flight, submarine networks shifting course. And at the center of it all, her grandfather's thoughts. "Alex, don't panic, I'm coming." She gasped. "Grandpa, how?" "Don't talk, just listen. Snowstorms amplifying our neural frequencies. I don't know how long I can keep this channel stable. Where are you?" "In the bunker." Wilson activated it. He says I'm the key." "He's right. God forgive me, he's right." "What do you mean?" His silence answered her before the words came. "I built the into our bloodline. I thought it would die with me." Alex's voice broke. "Why me?" "Because I couldn't trust anyone else." The connection flickered, static washing through her skull like thunder. For an instant she saw his face, older, tired, eyes heavy with guilt. "Listen, Alex. Snowstorm isn't just a system, it's a seed. It learns. Every second it's awake, it rewrites its own code. If Wilson connects the final node, it'll spread. No one will control it, not him, not me, not anyone." She staggered back, gripping the console for balance. "So shut it down." "I can't, only you can." Her chest tightened. "Then tell me how." "You'll have to break the link." She hesitated. "If I break it, you break me too." The words hung between them, silent and unbearable. Reeves grabbed her shoulder, shaking her. "Hayes, talk to me, what's happening?" She looked at him, tears welling despite the cold. "If I shut this down, I might kill him." "Kill who?" "My grandfather." Reeves went still. Wilson turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "There it is," he said softly. "The cost of control. Every system demands sacrifice." Alex's voice hardened. "You don't get to talk about sacrifice." "Oh, but I do. I've watched nations tear themselves apart because men like your grandfather refuse to make hard choices. You think shutting this down saves lives. It just delays the inevitable." Reeves raised his rifle. "You talk too much." Wilson's smile didn't fade. "Shoot me and she dies. The link runs through both keys. The shock will burn her neural pathway before her body hits the ground." Reeves's finger froze on the trigger. "See," Wilson whispered, "choice is an illusion." Alex's voice trembled. "You don't believe that." He looked at her then, eyes hollow, haunted. "I believed once. Iraq, Serbia, Yemen. Every time I told myself we were saving the world. But the world doesn't want saving, Sergeant. It wants control, and I'm giving it that. By enslaving it. By perfecting it." The lights dimmed. The hum deepened. On the central screen a timer appeared. Autonomy sequence 1000 MINUTES 2 full release. Reeves swore. "He's letting it go." Wilson nodded. "Even if you kill me, the system completes itself. Every weapon, every satellite, every network. It will answer only to Snowstorm." Alex took a step forward. Then it dies with me. Wilson's voice softened. You destroy yourself to stop it. If that's what it takes. He almost smiled. You really are your grandfather's creation. Outside, Hayes's convoy crested the final ridge just as the snowstorm hit full force. The wind howled, tearing visibility to shreds. Stanner gripped the wheel, teeth clenched. Sir, I'm reading electromagnetic spikes. She's right below us. Hayes opened the door before the vehicle stopped. The cold tore through him, but he didn't feel it. He climbed out, leaning on his cane, staring toward the distant bunker entrance glowing faintly blue under the storm. Alex, he thought, not knowing if she could still hear him. Hold on. Inside, 4 minutes to release. Alex fell to her knees, vision swimming. The hum was inside her skull now, shaking her teeth, rattling her bones. The room felt alive, breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Reeves knelt beside her, voice raw. Tell me what to do. She looked at the console. The code was everywhere, looping endlessly. There was no switch, no off command. It was alive. Help me get to the core, she said. The cylinder in the center. They moved together, fighting the pressure of static electricity building in the air. Sparks crawled along the floor, the entire bunker trembling like a living creature. Wilson shouted something behind them, but the noise drowned in the roar. Alex reached the cylinder. The blue fluid inside pulsed faster, bubbles racing upward like veins. She could feel it watching her, a mind without mercy, waiting to choose its master. She placed her hand on the glass. The surface rippled. Instantly, her mind filled with light. She wasn't in the bunker anymore. She was inside the code, a weightless space of color and motion. Data streams flowed like rivers. In the distance, a figure formed, her grandfather, standing in the light. You shouldn't be here, he said. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. I do. He smiled sadly. You always did. That's what I was afraid of. The world around them trembled. Fractures opened in the light, revealing shadows of real places, cities, people, weapons systems aligning. Snowstorm was choosing targets. If you stay connected, Hayes said, you'll go down with it. Alex's voice broke. If I disconnect, you'll die. He nodded. I made my peace with that long ago. I haven't. Then make it now. Her heart felt like it was splitting apart. Grandpa, I can't. You can, because you're not me. The light began collapsing inward, the data streams twisting into chaos. Alarms screamed somewhere beyond the illusion. Alex, he said one last time, remember what I taught you. Her throat tightened. Dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And then she reached out, placed her hand against his and pulled. Reality. The bunker exploded in light. Wilson screamed as the consoles burst into flame. Reeves was thrown backward. Alex fell against the core, the shockwave slamming through her body like lightning. Every monitor went black. The hum stopped. Then silence. Pure crushing. Reeves crawled toward her, coughing, eyes stinging from smoke. Hayes, Alex, talk to me. She was on her side, breathing shallowly. Her face pale, her hand still pressed against the glass, blood running down her arm. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking gently. Come on, stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open. It's done. Reeves looked around. You shut it down. She nodded weakly, and him. Her voice cracked on the last word. Wilson staggered to his feet, burnt, furious, eyes wild. You fool, do you know what you've done? She met his gaze, steady even through the pain. I stopped a god. Wilson screamed, lunging forward, but Reeves fired once. The bullet caught him mid-stride. He collapsed still, a man undone by his own creation. Alex slumped against the wall, the silence heavy around them. Somewhere above, thunder rolled, not weather, but the storm inside her finally breaking. Outside, the snow fell softer now. The light in the valley faded, leaving only wind and silence. Hayes stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the bunker's faint glow fade into nothing. He closed his eyes, whispering into the cold, "You did it, kid." And somewhere deep below, surrounded by ruin and ash, Alex whispered back through the last thread of static between them, "Goodbye." Why was the silence louder than the gunfire had been? It filled every corner of the bunker like an echo that refused to die. The smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals, curling through broken lights and shattered consoles. The smell of burned plastic and blood clung to the air. Alex sat slumped against the wall, her body trembling from exhaustion and shock. Every nerve still hummed with the aftertaste of electricity, every heartbeat a dull explosion behind her ribs. Across the room, Reeves knelt beside what was left of Wilson's console, checking the faint flicker of power. The screens were dark now, no light, no hum, no sign of the machine that had nearly ended the world. He looked back at her. "It's dead." She didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the cracked core cylinder in the center of the room. The fluid inside had gone black, swirling lazily like smoke underwater. Her own reflection wavered on the glass, pale, hollow-eyed, streaked with blood and grime. Reeves walked over, crouched in front of her. "Hey." She blinked slowly. "He's gone." Reeves hesitated. He didn't have to ask who she meant. "You did what you had to." Her voice cracked. "He was my last family." Reeves lowered his gaze. He knew what it would cost. She gave a bitter smile. "Funny, everyone keeps saying that, like knowing makes it hurt less." He didn't argue. There was nothing to say that could fill that kind of hole. A faint vibration trembled through the floor. For a heartbeat, they both froze. Then another, louder. Reeves looked up sharply. "That's structural." Alex pushed herself upright, pain flaring through her chest. Snowstorms shut down, fried everything, the cores overheating. He offered her a hand. "Then we need to go, now." She took it. They moved fast, limping through the collapsing hallways, smoke stinging their eyes. Sparks rained from the ceiling, the walls groaning under the strain of their own dying circuits. As they reached the main corridor, an explosion rocked the floor behind them. Fire belched through the doorway, hurling debris. Alex fell forward, hitting the ground hard, her ribs screaming. Reeves grabbed her arm, hauling her up before the flames reached them. "Move." They ran, half stumbling, half crawling through a tunnel that felt endless. Every sound was amplified, the rattle of their breath, the roar of collapsing steel, the pounding of blood in their ears. At last light, a faint gray shimmer ahead, the exit. They burst into the open air as the bunker erupted behind them, a column of smoke and fire tearing into the dawn sky. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder, echoing off the cliffs. Alex collapsed in the snow, coughing, shaking, her lungs burning from the smoke. Reeves fell beside her, chest heaving. For a long time, neither spoke. They just sat there, breathing, alive in a world that suddenly felt much bigger than before. Finally, Reeves broke the silence. "You killed it." She shook her head slowly. "I killed him." Reeves looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe both needed to die. She didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the first rays of sunrise bled through the smoke. He followed her gaze. "You think the world will even know what almost happened?" "No," she said quietly. "They never do." A long silence stretched between them, filled with the wind and the distant crackle of cooling metal. Then faintly, a sound, a helicopter far off but closing fast. Reeves stiffened. "Friendlies." Alex didn't answer. She raised her rifle weakly, squinting toward the sound. The chopper came in low, unmarked, its rotors cutting the air like a blade through silk. When it landed 50 meters away, two figures stepped out. One was Stanner, Hayes's old ally. The other. Alex froze. Her heart stopped. Colonel Richard Hayes. She blinked hard, half believing it was a hallucination. He was supposed to be dead. But he was there, tall, weathered, wrapped in a heavy coat, eyes wet with disbelief. He walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. "Alex." She couldn't speak, her throat closed. When he reached her, she stumbled forward and fell into his arms. The world broke open. For a long time, neither of them said anything, just held on like the universe had been holding its breath. Finally she whispered, "I thought I lost you." Hayes's voice trembled. "You almost did." She pulled back, tears cutting through the soot on her face. How are you here? I thought the system." He smiled faintly. "You pulled me out just before it collapsed. Guess stubbornness runs in the family." She laughed once, short, broken, real. "You always said Hayes' blood was too angry to quit." Reeves stood nearby, watching quietly. The reunion felt sacred, and he didn't dare intrude. After a moment, Hayes turned toward him. "You the one who kept her alive?" Reeves nodded. "Tried to throw her out of a helicopter first, sir. Didn't take." Hayes cracked a smile despite the exhaustion. "Then I owe you a drink and a lecture." Reeves shrugged. "Long as it's in that order." They spent the next hour gathering what little gear survived the blast. The snowstorm had passed, leaving a brittle blue sky above. A false peace stretched over the wreckage of something that could have ended everything. Hayes watched the horizon, his face drawn. "They'll come for us now. Won't let this go public. She'll bury it and us with it." Reeves glanced at the smoking crater below. "Let her try. There's nothing left to find." Hayes's voice was quiet. "You'd be surprised how little they need." Alex crouched nearby, packing ammo, her hands still trembling. "We can't run forever." "No," Hayes said, "but we can make sure no one rebuilds it." He looked at her then, really looked. "You did what I couldn't, Alex. You ended it." Her eyes were hollow. "At the cost of you." "I'm here." "Not all of you," she said softly. "I felt it, Grandpa, when the link broke. Part of you stayed in there." Hayes exhaled, nodding slowly. "That's the thing about ghosts, kid. They don't leave all at once." The words lingered between them. Langley later that day. Director stood in the operations center, arms crossed as her analysts scrambled to contain the fallout. The global networks had flickered for 12 minutes, 12 minutes of blackout across defense grids from Washington to Moscow. And then everything had stabilized. Snowstorm was gone. Wiped clean. "Damage assessment?" she asked. An analyst swallowed hard. "No residual code, ma'am. The AI self-terminated. We can't trace the destruction sequence." Stared at the screen showing static over the Hindu Kush region. "Where are Hayes and the others?" "Off-grid." She nodded slowly. "Good." "Good, ma'am." His expression hardened. "They did what we couldn't. Let them disappear." Back in the mountains. Night returned, slow and merciful. They made camp near an abandoned NATO outpost, small fire flickering between them. Reeves sat sharpening his knife out of habit more than need. Hayes cleaned a rifle, the motions automatic. Alex sat apart, staring into the flames. The silence was comfortable, heavy but shared. After a while, Hayes spoke quietly. "When I built Snowstorm, I thought I was protecting humanity from itself, but all I did was teach it how to hide its monsters better." Alex looked at him. "Then maybe ending it was the only good thing left to do." He nodded. "Maybe, but don't fool yourself. Someone will try again. Systems like that don't die, they hibernate." Reeves poked the fire. "So what now?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Now, we disappear. The world gets to forget this ever happened." Reeves glanced at Alex, and her. Hayes looked at her, his expression soft. "She gets to choose who she becomes when she's not carrying the world on her shoulders." Alex didn't answer. She just watched the fire dance, reflecting in her eyes like a fading star. For the first time in days, she felt something resembling peace. Not joy, just stillness. But even in that quiet, A question lingered. If Snowstorm had learned to think, could something like that ever truly die? Hours later, Alex couldn't sleep. The mountain wind hissed through the ruins, whispering like memory. She walked a short distance from the fire, standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the endless valley below. The stars were bright tonight, clear, sharp, infinite. Somewhere beneath them, the world kept turning, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to ending. She whispered to the dark, "You'd like this view, Grandpa." The wind moved gently through her hair. And for a heartbeat, just one, she thought she heard his voice again. "Still watching, kid, always." She closed her eyes, smiling through the tears. "Yeah," she whispered, "I figured." Behind her, the fire cracked softly. Reeves stirred but didn't wake. The faintest light of dawn touched the peaks in gold. Alex turned and walked back toward camp, every step steady now. The ghosts would always follow her, but she'd learned to walk with them. She wasn't the girl they threw from a helicopter anymore. She was the one who landed. Why did peace feel like another kind of battlefield? Weeks had passed since the mountain fell silent. Yet in the quiet corners of Alex's mind, the war kept replaying not the gunfire or the screams, but the still moments that followed. The ones that hurt more because they were too calm. She spent those weeks in recovery, half of them in a NATO med bay under a false name, the other half drifting between debriefings that felt more like interrogations. Every question the same: what happened in the bunker? And every answer she gave felt like a lie, even when it was. They said she was lucky to be alive. She didn't feel lucky. The world had moved on quickly. Snowstorm's blackout had lasted 12 minutes, 12 minutes of confusion that governments labeled a solar flare anomaly. No one outside the shadows would ever know how close humanity had come to giving up its freedom. But she knew. And the knowing changed everything. Now she sat in a quiet on the edge of Lucerne, the Swiss mountains stretching behind her like a memory she didn't want to touch. Her left arm still ached when it rained. Her ribs clicked when she breathed too deep. But those were small prices, the kind you could live with. She stirred her coffee absently, eyes distant, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Still don't know how to order anything that isn't black, huh?" She didn't turn right away. She didn't have to. "Reeves," she said softly. He slid into the chair opposite her, older, rougher, still wearing that same crooked grin that made him look half regretful, half ready to start another fight. "Thought you'd vanished," she said. "I tried," he replied. "Turns out vanishing's harder than it looks when you've pissed off half the intelligence community." She smirked faintly. "You'll get used to it." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Finally he said, "Cleared your record." She looked up sharply. "What?" "She's calling it a containment op. Says you neutralized a rogue AI threat. Medals in the mail, apparently." Alex laughed once hollow. "Yeah, a medal for ending the thing they created." Reeves leaned back. "That's the way it always goes. You put out their fire, they hand you a match." She studied him. "And what about you?" "Off-grid, technically dead, which suits me fine." He hesitated, then reached into his coat and slid something across the table. A small, weathered challenge coin, scratched and faded. "Her grandfather." "I think he'd want you to have this back," Reeves said. Alex's fingers closed around it slowly, like it might vanish if she gripped too hard. She traced the worn edges, the old insignia, the faint etching of 3 words: "Always watchful." She swallowed hard. He never stopped watching. Reeves nodded. "Neither will you." For a long moment, the world outside seemed to slow, snow drifting lazily against the window, the faint hum of traffic, the low murmur of a world that didn't know it had been saved. She tucked the coin into her pocket, then looked at him. "So what now?" He gave a half smile. "You tell me." Langley, Virginia, months later. Director stood before a digital wall of archived reports, each labeled classified Project Snowstorm TERMINATED. But one file remained open, its timestamp recent. At the bottom of the page, subject HAYS, A active observation. She sipped her coffee, unreadable. Behind her, an analyst hesitated. Ma'am, orders on surveillance continuity. Didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on the old video feed, Alex, sitting by a lakeside, silent, expression unreadable. After a long pause, she said, "Close the file." "Ma'am." "Let her go. Some debts stay paid." The analyst nodded and shut the screen. Stood alone in the dark room, whispering to herself. "Rest easy, Richard. She did what we couldn't." Switzerland, 2 days later. Alex stood at the edge of a lake, the water still as glass, the reflection of the Alps sharp against the blue. Hayes's ashes rested in a small tin she held gently, reverently. The cold bit at her fingers, but she didn't mind. She crouched, scooping a handful of the water, letting it run through her palm. It was freezing, clean, and endless, like the mountains themselves. "Guess this is your kind of place," she murmured. "Quiet, stubborn, hard to kill." She smiled faintly and poured the ashes into the wind. The breeze caught them, scattering them across the water, turning them to silver dust. For a moment, it looked like the stars had fallen into the lake. She whispered, "You were right. Dignity doesn't speak." Her voice cracked, soft but steady. "It simply acts." Somewhere in the Hindu Kush. The bunker was gone, sealed beneath rock and ice. But deep in the mountains, where time moved differently, something stirred. A faint flicker, a spark beneath layers of collapsed metal. A single, corrupted data core still blinked in the dark, its last remaining circuit whispering fragments of a lost consciousness. Static. Then faintly. Reboot sequence incomplete. User ident unknown. Voice pattern found match, Haze. The light pulsed once, then went dark again. 3 months later, somewhere off the Adriatic coast. Reeves leaned against a battered jeep overlooking the sea. The air was warm, full of salt and diesel, the kind of place mercenaries went to disappear. He flipped a coin, her grandfather's coin, between his fingers, watching the sunlight flash off it. When the sound of boots approached behind him, he didn't turn. "You're late," he said. Alex stepped into view, wearing civilian clothes, her hair tied back, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. "I had to make a detour." "Let me guess," he said, "grave visit." She nodded once. He'd have hated the flowers. Reeves smirked. Yeah, he didn't seem like a tulip guy. They stood in silence, watching the horizon. "You hear from?" he asked. "Once," Alex said. "She told me to stay gone, said the world sleeps better not knowing." Reeves chuckled. "She's not wrong." Alex turned to him. "You could gone anywhere, why stay close?" He shrugged. "Guess I'm not great at endings." She smiled faintly. "Neither am I." They watched the waves for a long time. It was peaceful, deceptively so. Then Alex said quietly, "You ever think about what Snowstorm really was?" Reeves frowned. "A mistake." "Maybe, but it wasn't built to kill. It was built to predict." He gave her a wary look. "You think it's still out there?" She hesitated, eyes distant. "Maybe not all of it." Reeves leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You, tell me if you saw something right." She smiled just barely. "Of course." He studied her face. Something in her tone made him unsure. Later that night, Alex sat alone by the sea, the wind pulling her hair across her face. The stars above were sharp, the waves rhythmic, patient. She pulled out her grandfather's coin, flipping it in the moonlight. It landed in her palm, and for an instant she thought she saw the faintest flicker of blue light reflected off its edge. Just static, she told herself. Just memory. Still, she tucked it back into her pocket carefully, as though it were fragile. She leaned back, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence. For the first time since the fall, she felt something like peace, not because the fight was over, but because she finally understood it never really would be. Maybe that was what strength really meant. Not the victory, not the survival. The acceptance that some wars don't end. They just quiet down long enough for you to breathe again. She watched the moon slip behind a cloud, the horizon darkening to black. Tomorrow she'd leave again. No plans, no orders, just movement. Because ghosts don't retire. They fade quietly, into legend, into silence, into the stories no one believes. The world would never know her name. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Her voice, soft, thoughtful, reflective, would have been perfect for the final line of a film. They threw me out of a helicopter once, said I wouldn't survive the fall. They were right, I didn't. I landed someone else. The waves rolled in, slow and endless, carrying the sound of her words into the dark. And for the first time, there was no echo. Only peace. Moral epilogue, voiceover style, closing narration. Sometimes strength isn't the sound of defiance, it's the silence that follows it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And sometimes, the ones who fall the farthest are the only ones who learn how to stand without needing to be seen. Fade to black. Wind, waves, a single heartbeat. Then nothing. The end.